September of 1897. I was standing outside Pritchard's General Store when I saw something that had changed my life forever. A 14-year-old girl on her knees in the mud, trying to gather spilled cornmeal while Cyrus Heath ground it into the dirt with his boot heel. She was making sounds, desperate sounds, the kind deaf folks make when they're trying to speak but can't form the words right. The crowd just stood there watching, some laughing, most looking away like they didn't want to see what they were seeing. I reckon that's when I knew. When good people turn their backs on cruelty, evil wins without a fight. By midnight, that same girl would be accused of murder, covered in a dead boy's blood, and I'd be the only fool standing between her and a rope. By dawn, I'd either prove her innocent or we'd both be buried 6 feet under. But I'm getting ahead of myself. This story starts with cornmeal and ends with something a whole lot heavier. September, in the Oregon timber country means two things. The logging camps shut down for winter, and the men who've been up in the mountains for 6 months come flooding back to town with money burning holes in their pockets and too much time on their hands. That's when the trouble starts brewing. Sure as rain follows thunder. I'd been foreman at the Cascade Mill for near on 12 years. Name's Silas Brody, and I ain't much to look at. 6'2", shoulders broad from hauling timber, face weathered from 42 winters, most of them spent alone. My wife Sarah died 5 years back, took our little girl Emma with her when the scarlet fever swept through. Since then, I'd thrown myself into the work. 16-hour days, 7 days a week. The roar of the saws was better than the silence of an empty house. That Saturday, I was in town buying supplies, flour, coffee, nails, when I heard the commotion outside Pritchard's General Store. A crowd had gathered, maybe 20 folks, the kind that forms when something shameful's happening and people want to watch without getting their own hands dirty. I pushed through and saw what had them so entertained. Ruth Cavendish, that's what folks called her, though Cavendish was just her dead drunk of a father's name, was on her hands and knees in the mud. Her dress was threadbare, patched in a dozen places. Her bare feet were cracked and bleeding. She was trying to scoop up spilled cornmeal with her hands, making sounds in her throat, desperate animal sounds, because she'd been born deaf and couldn't form words proper. Standing over her, laughing like it was the funniest thing he'd ever seen, was Cyrus Heath. Now, Cyrus was the mill owner's son, 23 years old, handsome as sin, educated back east, and mean as a snake when he'd been drinking, which, judging by the whiskey smell rolling off him at 10 in the morning, he had been. "Dumb girl," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Can't talk, can't hear, probably can't think neither. Should have been put down at birth like a lame dog." The crowd laughed. Not everyone. Some folks looked uncomfortable, shifted their feet, but enough of them laughed to make my blood run hot. Ruth's hands moved frantically, signing something I couldn't understand. Tears cut clean tracks through the grime on her face. She was 14 years old and trying to buy a week's worth of cornmeal with coins she'd probably earned doing laundry or mending. And Cyrus had knocked her down, spilled her flour sack, and was now grinding what was left into the mud with his boot heel. "Reckon that's enough, Heath," I heard myself say. The laughter stopped like someone had slammed a door. Cyrus turned, his eyes narrowing. "What did you say, Brody?" I stepped forward, my knees creaking as I bent down and started gathering up what cornmeal could be saved. My hands were big and rough, clumsy with the small work, but I scooped it back into her sack gentle as I could. I said that's enough. I stood up slow, using every inch of my 6 feet 2 inches as I straightened to my full height. "Girl's done nothing to you." Ruth looked up at me with eyes brown as creek water, and for just a second, I saw my Emma looking back. Same age she would have been. Same scared, helpless expression. Something in my chest went tight and painful. Cyrus stepped closer, whiskey on his breath mixing with expensive cologne. "You defending a half-wit, Brody? Thought you had better sense than that." I got sense enough to know when a man's acting beneath himself. I held out the sack to Ruth. "Go on home now, girl." But she didn't move. Her hands came up, signing frantically, pointing at Cyrus, then at her own throat, then making a violent pushing motion. Her mouth opened in a silent cry, her whole body trembling. "She's touched in the head," Cyrus sneered, loud enough for the crowd. "Probably dangerous. You all know what they say about her kind, unpredictable, animals." "She ain't dangerous." My father's voice cut through the crowd. August Brody pushed his way forward, his walking stick tapping the boardwalk. He was 65, half blind from a logging accident, but his ears worked just fine. "She's trying to tell you something happened. Something bad." Ruth grabbed my arm, her fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. She pointed down the alley beside the store, then put both hands to her head like she was cradling something broken. Her face twisted with distress. That's when we heard the scream. A woman came running from behind the buildings, her apron splattered with something dark. Her face was white as flour, eyes huge with shock. "Someone get the marshal!" she shrieked. "It's Tom Wickham, the marshal's boy. He's dead." "Murdered!" The crowd surged toward the alley like water finding a crack. I looked down at Ruth, at her trembling hands, at the blood I hadn't noticed before on the hem of her dress, dark and fresh and damning, and Cyrus Heath's eyes locked onto her like a wolf spotting a wounded deer. "That girl," he said slowly, his voice carrying across the sudden silence. "She's covered in blood." They found young Tom Wickham behind the grain storage shed, his skull caved in with a piece of firewood still lying beside him. 17 years old, same age my Emma would have been if she'd lived. The wood was slick with blood and hair, lying there in the dirt like an accusation. Ruth stood frozen in the crowd, her dress stained dark down the right side. She was signing frantically, her hands moving so fast they blurred, but nobody in that town understood sign language. To them, she just looked wild, guilty. Marshal Wickham arrived at a dead run, his boots hammering the boardwalk. He was a hard man, the marshal, had to be, keeping order in a timber town, but when he saw his boy lying there in the dirt, his face crumpled like wet paper. "Who did this?" His voice came out barely a whisper. Then louder, nearly a roar. "Who did this?" 20 fingers pointed at Ruth. "She was in the alley when we found him," someone said. "Covered in his blood," another added. Cyrus Heath stepped forward, his face arranged in what looked like genuine sorrow. "Dangerous, Marshal. I tried to warn folks. She's not right in the head." The marshal's hand went to his gun. "Grab her." I stepped between them and the girl. Didn't think about it, didn't plan it, just moved. "Hold on now," I said, hands raised. "Girl can't even speak. How's she going to tell her side?" "She was found standing over my boy's body," the marshal's voice cracked. "That's all the side I need to hear. Could be she found him like that. Could be she saw who did it and can't tell us." My father's walking stick tapped forward. "My son's word is good, Marshal. Always has been. Give him 24 hours to sort this." The marshal's jaw worked. His eyes were red-rimmed, desperate. "24 hours, Brody. Then I'm coming for her, proof or not." I led Ruth through the parting crowd to my wagon, folks staring at us like we'd both lost our minds. Maybe we had. The ride up the mountain to my cabin took near an hour. Ruth sat beside me on the wagon bench, shaking so hard I could feel it through the wood. She didn't make a sound the whole way, just clutched her thin shawl around her shoulders and stared straight ahead with those wide, terrified eyes. My place was simple. Log cabin, 2 rooms, set back in the pines about 2 miles from town. I'd built it myself when Sarah and I married, added Emma's room after she was born. Now it echoed with absence. I helped Ruth down from the wagon, her hand cold as creek water in mine. Inside, I lit the oil lamp and the room filled with warm yellow light. She stood in the middle of my kitchen, small and lost, like a wild thing that didn't know if it was safe yet. "You can wash up," I said, pouring water from the pitcher into the basin. I'll figure something out." She touched my arm, gentle, then pointed to herself and made a pushing motion, then pointed at shadows gathering outside the window. She was trying to tell me, trying so hard. I pulled out a piece of charcoal and a board from my scrap pile, pushed them across the table toward her. Show me what you saw." Her hand trembled as she picked up the charcoal. For a long moment she just stared at the board, tears dripping onto the scarred wood. Then she started drawing, crude shapes, but clear enough. A tall figure, a smaller figure on the ground, a piece of wood raised high. And in the corner, a tiny figure watching. That would be Ruth. The tall figure wore a distinctive hat, wide-brimmed with a feather in the band. Cyrus Heath's hat. "Sweet Jesus," I breathed. "You saw Cyrus kill Tom." Ruth nodded so hard her whole body shook. She drew more, Two figures close together in the shed, then Tom appearing in the doorway, then Cyrus turning with the wood. A love affair discovered. A witness silenced. I was still staring at the drawing when I heard them. Horses, multiple horses, moving together up the mountain road. I looked out the window and my blood went cold. Torches. A dozen men at least, their flames turning the twilight orange. Cyrus Heath rode at the front, and beside him was Deacon Pritchard, the banker, the most respected man in town. They'd come for her already. Couldn't even wait the 24 hours. Ruth saw them too. Her hand found mine and gripped it so tight her nails drew blood. In the lamplight, her face had gone white as bone. I grabbed my rifle from over the door. "Stay inside. No matter what you hear, you stay inside." But she wouldn't let go of my hand, kept signing something over and over, frantic, desperate. I didn't know the words, but I understood the meaning well enough. "Please don't let them take me. Please." The torches were getting closer. I could hear voices now, men calling to each other, working themselves up to violence the way men do when they're scared and need to feel powerful. I checked my rifle, made sure it was loaded. "I won't let them hurt you," I said, knowing she couldn't hear me but hoping she could see it in my face. "I promise." The hoofbeats stopped outside my cabin. Boots hit the ground. Torchlight flickered across my windows, painting everything the color of hellfire. Then Cyrus Heath's voice rang out, friendly as Sunday morning. "Evening, Brody. We've come for the girl." I stepped out onto the porch, rifle cradled in my arms. Ruth tried to follow, but I motioned her back with a sharp shake of my head. Last thing I needed was her in the line of fire. The riders stopped 50 feet from my cabin, their torches making the dark woods look like the devil's own church. Cyrus sat his horse in front, flanked by Deacon Pritchard and a dozen of the town's respectable men. I recognized them all. The blacksmith, the livery owner, shopkeepers, loggers. Good men, mostly, but scared men. And scared men do terrible things when they convince themselves it's righteous. "Marshall gave me 24 hours, I said, keeping my voice level. "Marshall's grieving." Cyrus dismounted, smooth and confident like he was stepping into a parlor instead of threatening a man on his own land. "Can't think straight. We're here to help him out. Girl's dangerous, Silas." "Needs to be locked up before she hurts someone else." "She ain't dangerous." Deacon Pritchard urged his horse forward, his banker's voice all reason and concern. "Silas, be sensible. You're risking your reputation, your livelihood, for what? A girl who can't even tell you she's innocent? A deaf mute who's been trouble since the day she was born? Maybe that's exactly why she needs someone to stand for her." "Or maybe," Cyrus said, his voice dropping to something darker, "she's fooled you with those big sad eyes. My father's dealt with her type before. Defective, unpredictable. The kindest thing would be a quick rope. Save the county the cost of a trial." Something hot and ugly rose in my chest. The rifle came up, not quite pointed at anyone but close enough. "You take one more step toward this cabin, Heath, and we'll find out how quick you really are." My hands were steady. Years of handling timber had made me strong, and years of loss had emptied me of fear. I had nothing left to lose except the promise I'd made to a frightened girl. Cyrus stopped, but he was smiling. "You threatening me, Brody? In front of witnesses?" "I'm making a promise. Girl stays here until morning. Then we'll sort this proper." That's when my father's voice came from the darkness behind the cabin. "And I'm making the same promise." August Brody stepped into the torchlight, his old Spencer rifle cradled in his arms. Half blind he might be, but at close range, he could shoot straight enough to matter. "Dad, get back inside." "Hush, boy. I didn't raise you to stand alone." He squinted at the crowd, his milky eyes finding faces by memory more than sight. "Known most of you since you were in short pants. Deacon, I lent your daddy money to start that bank. Miller, I pulled you out of a jam-up that would have crushed you flat. You're all gonna stand there and let mob rule take over. That what we've come to?" Some of the men shifted uncomfortably in their saddles. A few lowered their torches, but not enough. Not nearly enough. Cyrus wasn't done. He never was. "Old man Brody, you're defending a killer. Your son's defending her." Makes me wonder. He let it hang there, poison dripping from every word. Makes me wonder what kind of relationship he's got with that girl. Bringing her up here to his cabin, all alone. Awful. Protective of her, ain't he? The implication hit like a fist to the gut. Ruth was 14. I was 42. The suggestion was filth, and Cyrus knew exactly what he was doing. Watch your mouth, Heath. My voice had gone quiet. Dangerous. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Cyrus spread his hands, the picture of innocent concern. Lonely widower, young girl, up here in the woods alone. Folks will talk, Silas. Already are talking. Is she even still in one piece, or have you— I shot the torch out of his hand. The blast echoed through the trees like thunder. Cyrus yelped and stumbled backward, his hand smoking but intact. The crowd scattered, horses rearing and snorting. Men shouted, reaching for weapons. When the gun smoke cleared, my rifle was pointed at Cyrus's head. "Next one goes between your eyes," I said. "Now get off my land." For a long moment, nobody moved. The only sound was the crackling of fallen torches in the dirt and the heavy breathing of frightened horses. Cyrus's face had gone white, but his eyes burned with pure hatred. "You'll regret this, Brody. I'll see you ruined. You and that freak girl both. By the time I'm done, you won't have a job, a home, or a name worth speaking." He swung back onto his horse, still cradling his burned hand. "Enjoy your last night of freedom. Come morning, the whole county will know what kind of man you really are." They left, but slow, reluctant. Like wolves driven from a kill they weren't quite ready to abandon. I watched until the last torch disappeared down the mountain road, my heart hammering against my ribs. Inside, Ruth had collapsed at the kitchen table, crying silently, her whole body heaving with sobs she couldn't voice. I'd never felt more helpless in my entire life. Couldn't comfort her with words she couldn't hear. Couldn't promise her it would be all right when I didn't know if that was true. I sat down across from her and did the only thing I could think of. Reached across the table and took her hand in mine, small and cold and trembling. She looked up, tears streaming down her face, and for just a moment our eyes met. In hers I saw terror, yes, but also something else, something that looked almost like trust. She squeezed my hand. Once. Firm. Then she picked up the charcoal again and drew something new on the board. Not the murder scene this time. Something different. A small figure and a large figure, standing side by side. Between them, she drew a line connecting their hands. It took me a moment to understand. Then it hit me like a falling tree. Family. She was asking if we could be family, if I would be her father, not just her protector. Before I could respond, we heard horses again, just one this time, coming fast and reckless up the mountain road. I grabbed the rifle and went to the window, Marshal Wickham riding hard through the darkness. Alone. When he dismounted, I saw the rope coiled over his saddle horn, and I knew that 24 hours had just become 24 minutes. Marshal Wickham stood on my porch swaying, drunk. His eyes were wild with grief, red-rimmed and hollow. In one hand he held that rope, in the other, nothing. He'd come unarmed except for the means of execution. "Marshal," I said carefully, the rifle still in my hands, "you've been drinking." "Damn right I have." His voice broke on the words. "My boy's dead, Silas. My only child. His mother died bringing him into this world, and now he's gone too. I got nothing left. Nothing." "I understand that pain, Marshal. God knows I do." And I did, every hollow word of it. "But hanging an innocent girl won't bring Tom back." "Innocent?" He laughed, bitter as burnt coffee. "She was standing over him, blood on her hands. Because she found him that way." I held up the drawing Ruth had made. "Look, she saw who really killed Tom." Wickham squinted at the charcoal sketch, his drunken eyes trying to focus. Even through the whiskey haze, he could make out the shapes. The tall figure with the distinctive hat, the smaller figure on the ground, the piece of wood raised to strike. That's Cyrus Heath," he said slowly. "Ruth can't speak, but she can show us. She saw Cyrus kill your boy." For a long moment, something shifted in the marshal's face. doubt, maybe even hope. Then it hardened again, grief winning out over reason. No. No, the Heath family wouldn't. Cyrus is quality. Educated. Why would he? Maybe Tom saw something he shouldn't have, my father said from the doorway. Maybe Cyrus has secrets worth killing for. Wickham stared at the drawing, his hand trembling. Then the rope slipped from his fingers and hit the porch with a dull thud. Jesus Christ, what was I about to do? He looked at Ruth standing behind me, really looked at her for the first time. I nearly, if I'd, but you didn't, I said quietly. And now we can get real justice for Tom. The marshal sank down onto the porch steps, head in his hands. There's one way, one legal way this girl can't be touched so easy. What's that? Adoption. He looked up at me, his eyes clearing slightly. Old territorial law still on the books. A man of good character can adopt an orphan by declaration before a judge. Once she's legally your daughter, they'd have to go through you to get to her. Makes it harder for them. My heart started pounding. Adopted. Judge Haskell owes me a favor. We could do it first thing tomorrow, before Cyrus has time to organize anything bigger. Wickham gripped my shoulder. But Silas, once you do this, there's no going back. You'll be her father in the eyes of God and law, and the Heaths will make your life hell for it. I looked at Ruth. She was watching me, understanding somehow what was being discussed. Those brown eyes asking me silently if I'd do it, if I'd make myself responsible for her forever. I thought of Emma. I thought of the empty room in my cabin that had stayed empty for 5 years. All right, I heard myself say. I'll adopt her. Ruth crossed to me then, slowly, like she was afraid I might change my mind. She looked up into my face, tears welling in her eyes. Then she took my hand and placed it on top of her head, like a blessing, like an oath. And for the first time in 5 years, I felt like a father again. And the marshal left after that, riding back down the mountain more sober than he'd arrived, said he'd arrange everything with Judge Haskell for first light. Inside, I made Ruth a bed in Emma's old room. The sheets smelled of cedar from being stored so long. She stood in the doorway watching me, her thin frame barely filling her threadbare dress. This was my daughter's room, I said, knowing she couldn't hear but needing to say it anyway. She'd want you to have it. Ruth touched the quilts, the small wooden doll I'd carved for Emma still sitting on the shelf. Then she looked at me and signed something, hands moving from her heart outward. Thank you. I didn't know sign language, but some meanings are universal. I left her to sleep, though I doubted she would. Doubted I would either. In the main room, my father sat by the dying fire, his rifle across his knees. You know what you've done, boy? I know. Cyrus Heath won't stop. Men like him never do. They can't stand to lose, especially not to someone they consider beneath them. I know that too. Your job at the mill. Gone, probably. This house. Mortgaged to Pritchard's bank. He'll call it in. My father was quiet for a moment. Your mother would be proud. So would Sarah. Before I could respond, I heard it. Faint at first, then growing louder. The sound of many horses. Not a dozen this time. More, many more. Through the window I saw torches. Dozens of them snaking up the mountain road like a river of fire. The whole town, it looked like. Maybe 50 men, maybe more. My father stood, his old bones creaking. They've come in force. Dogs were barking in the distance, the Johnsons' hounds down the mountain, spooked by the procession. In the forest, the night birds had gone silent. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Ruth appeared in the bedroom doorway, her face pale. She'd felt the vibrations of the horses through the floorboards. The torches were getting closer. I could make out faces now, not just Cyrus and his cronies, but townspeople I'd known for years. The butcher, the preacher, men I'd worked alongside at the mill. All of them carrying torches or rifles or both. At the front rode Cyrus Heath and his father, Old Man Heath himself, the mill owner, the richest man in the county. If he was here, this wasn't just a mob. This was official, organized, sanctioned by money and power. They stopped at the edge of my property, forming a semicircle around the cabin. The torchlight turned the clearing into something from the Old Testament. Judgment Day come early, wrath made visible. Old Man Heath's voice boomed out, cold and authoritative. Silas Brody, you're harboring a murderess and interfering with justice. Send the girl out now, or we'll come in and take her. You have 5 minutes to decide. Ruth's hand found mine in the darkness. Squeezed hard. My father checked his rifle. 5 minutes ain't long. No, I agreed. It ain't. Through the window, I watched them plant their torches in the ground, forming a ring of fire around my home, trapping us. The flames reflected off rifle barrels, off cold eyes, off the righteous certainty of a mob that believed God was on their side. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of smoke and pine pitch. Storm clouds were rolling in from the west, blotting out the stars one by one. In the distance, thunder rumbled. Ruth was trembling beside me. I wanted to tell her it would be all right, wanted to promise her we'd make it through this, but I'd never been good at lying. Old Man Heath's voice came again. 4 minutes, Brody. In Emma's old room, the wooden doll sat on its shelf, its painted eyes reflecting the torchlight from outside, watching, waiting, bearing witness to whatever came next. 3 minutes! Old Man Heath's voice cut through the night like an axe through timber. I looked at Ruth, at my father, at the cabin I'd built with my own hands. Then I made a choice that probably marked me as the biggest fool in Oregon. I opened the door and stepped out onto the porch. Alone. 50 rifles swung toward me. 50 faces caught between righteousness and bloodlust. The torchlight made monsters of men I'd known my whole life. The girl stays, I said, loud enough to carry. She's innocent, and I got proof. You want her, you'll have to go through me to get her. Old Man Heath's face was carved from granite. You're a fool, Brody. A sentimental fool throwing his life away for a defective girl who'll never be right in the head. Maybe I am a fool, but I can live with being a fool. Can you live with hanging an innocent child? She was found over my grandson's body. A woman's voice, shrill with grief. Tom's grandmother, I realized. She killed him. No, ma'am, she didn't. She saw who did, and that's why certain folks want her silenced. I looked directly at Cyrus. Ain't that right, Heath? Cyrus's face remained calm, but something flickered in his eyes. You're making wild accusations, Brody, desperate lies to save your own skin. Then why are you here? Why bring 50 men to take one deaf girl if you ain't afraid of what she saw? Because justice. Justice? Marshal Wickham's voice rang out as he rode up from the rear of the mob. That what we're calling this? A mob with torches surrounding a man's home in the middle of the night? Marshal, you're too close to this, Old Man Heath said. Step aside and let what? Let you burn down Silas Brody's cabin with him and a child inside? Wickham dismounted, his face haggard but sober now, stone sober. I was about to do something terrible tonight, something I'd never be able to take back. Silas stopped me, made me look at the evidence. Evidence? Deacon Pritchard scoffed. A drawing by a simpleton? A drawing that shows my boy was murdered by someone other than that girl. Wickham pulled out the charcoal sketch, held it up in the torchlight. Someone who had reason to silence Tom. Someone with secrets worth killing for. The crowd murmured, uncertain now. Furthermore, Wickham continued, his voice carrying authority again, come morning, Ruth Cavendish will be Ruth Brody, legally adopted. Judge Haskell's already signed the papers at my request. She's under Silas's protection as his daughter. Any man who harms her harms a member of a respectable family. That stopped them. Adoption wasn't something taken lightly, not in a town where family names meant everything. Old Man Heath's face darkened. This is an outrage. You can't just— Old territorial law still valid, Wickham said. A man of good standing can adopt an orphan in times of emergency. Silas Brody is a man of good standing. Or was, until you all came up here with torches? The wind was picking up now, storm clouds rolling in thick and heavy. Thunder rumbled closer. The torches flickered and danced. Go home, Wickham said, all of you. Before you do something you can't undo. There'll be a proper investigation, a proper trial if needed, but not like this. Not tonight. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then the preacher, Reverend Shaw, a decent man at heart, lowered his torch. The marshal's right. This ain't Christian. This ain't justice. Others followed. Not all, but enough. The mob began to fracture, men shifting uncomfortably, suddenly aware of what they'd been about to do. But Cyrus wasn't done. You're protecting a killer, Marshal. When she murders again, that blood's on your hands. If she's guilty, the law will prove it, but I won't have her hanged by a mob. Wickham's eyes were hard. Now go home, all of you. This is finished. Slowly, reluctantly, the crowd began to disperse. Torches were extinguished. Horses turned back down the mountain. Within 20 minutes, only a few stragglers remained, and then they too melted into the darkness. Old Man Heath was the last to leave. He looked at me with cold calculation. You've made an enemy tonight, Brody, a powerful one. That adoption won't protect you from what's coming. Then he wheeled his horse and disappeared into the storm. Inside, Ruth sat at the table, the lamp casting warm light across her tear-stained face. When I came in, she looked up with such relief it nearly broke me. I sat down across from her, suddenly exhausted. My hands were shaking from the adrenaline draining away. Ruth reached across the table and took my hand in both of hers. Small hands, work-roughened, but gentle. She held my hand like it was something precious. Then she did something I didn't expect. She took the chalk and wrote on the board in careful, uncertain letters. Father, one word. But it carried the weight of 1,000 prayers. I looked at this girl, this frightened, brave, silent girl who'd witnessed a murder and survived being blamed for it, who'd been kicked and mocked and treated like an animal her whole life, and who was now asking me, a broken-down widower with nothing to offer, to be her family. Yeah, I said, my voice rough. Yeah, I reckon that's what I am now. She smiled then, the first real smile I'd seen on her face. It transformed her, made her look young and hopeful instead of hunted and desperate. My father appeared in the doorway. You did good tonight, boy. Real good. We ain't out of the woods yet. No, but at least we're still breathing. Ruth squeezed my hand 3 times, some kind of signal, I realized, her way of saying something important when she had no voice. I squeezed back 3 times, hoping she understood. We sat like that for a long while, just holding hands across the table, while the storm finally broke outside. Rain hammered the roof, washing away the scorch marks where torches had been planted. Morning came gray and cold. We rode into town just after dawn, me, Ruth, my father, and Marshal Wickham. The streets were empty, folks hiding behind curtains, ashamed of what they'd almost done. Judge Haskell's office smelled of old paper and pipe tobacco. The judge himself was 70 if he was a day, but his eyes were sharp. Marshall tells me this is an emergency adoption. Yes, sir. Girl's an orphan? Her father died in a mill accident 6 months back. No other kin. Haskell studied Ruth, who stood beside me in a borrowed dress that was still too large. Child, do you consent to this adoption? Nod if yes. Ruth nodded so hard her whole body moved. Good enough for me. Haskell signed the papers with a flourish. As of this moment, Ruth Cavendish is Ruth Brody. Congratulations. May God have mercy on you both. We'd barely stepped outside when Deacon Pritchard appeared with a document in his hand and murder in his eyes. Silas Brody, he said coldly, I'm calling in your mortgage. Immediately. You have 5 days to pay $800, or the bank seizes your property. My stomach dropped. You can't do that. Contract says I got 3 months. Contract has a morality clause. Harboring an accused murderess qualifies. His smile was thin and cruel. You'll be homeless by week's end, Brody. You and your new daughter. Maybe then you'll understand the cost of your foolish compassion. He walked away, leaving me standing there with Ruth's hand in mine and the weight of impossible debt crushing down. $800, my father said quietly. We don't have it. Nobody does. Marshal Wickham's face was grim. There's more. Old Man Heath came to see me this morning. You've been fired from the mill, Silas. Effective immediately. He's also blacklisting you. Any man who hires you gets cut off from Heath lumber contracts. No home, no job, no way to provide for the child I'd just sworn to protect. Ruth looked up at me, sensing something was wrong. Her eyes asked the question her voice couldn't. Are you sorry you chose me? I squeezed her hand. We'll figure it out, I said. Somehow. But I had no idea how. That's when Vernon Kemp came running up the street, his face pale with panic. Silas, thank God I found you. It's worse than you think. Cyrus, he's convinced his father to press criminal charges, not just against Ruth, against you too. Kidnapping, corruption of a minor. They're saying, he swallowed hard, they're saying you took her for immoral purposes, that you're a predator. The world tilted. They weren't just going to take my home and livelihood. They were going to destroy my name, make me into a monster. And then they'd hang Ruth anyway. Vernon pulled me aside, away from Ruth's eyes, though she couldn't hear us anyway. They're serving the warrant this afternoon. Sheriff Coleman's coming with deputies. Cyrus has witnesses lined up, all lies, but enough to get you arrested and the girl taken into custody. Witnesses to what? I ain't done nothing wrong. Doesn't matter what's true. Matters what they can make people believe. Vernon's voice dropped to barely a whisper. Cyrus told his father you've been inappropriate with the girl. That's why you adopted her so quick. To hide what you'd done. The accusation was so vile I couldn't speak for a moment. Just stood there, rage and helplessness warring in my chest. They'll paint you as a monster, Vernon continued. A lonely man who took advantage of a deaf child who couldn't cry for help. By the time they're done, even folks who know you won't be sure what to believe. My father's hand gripped my shoulder. We need to get you out of town. Both of you. Tonight. Running makes me look guilty. Staying gets you hanged. Ruth was watching us from across the street, her face pale but trusting. She'd placed her life in my hands, and now those hands were tied. There might be another way, a voice said behind us. We turned to find Samuel Two Bears standing in the alley shadows. The old Kalapuya elder was ancient, near 90, but his eyes were sharp as flint. Old Sam, my father said, what are you doing in town? Heard about the Brody boys' trouble. Came to see if the rumors were true. Samuel stepped into the light, leaning heavy on his walking stick, and to offer something that might help. Unless you got $800 and a time machine, I don't see how. I have something better. Information. Samuel's weathered face was grim. About Cyrus Heath. About what he did 30 years ago. We followed him to the church, the only place in town we could talk without being overheard. Inside, the morning light filtered through simple glass windows, painting everything in shades of gray. Samuel pulled a bundle from inside his coat. Old papers, yellowed and brittle with age. My brother had a daughter. Sweet girl, name of Morning Dove. She was 16 when Cyrus Heath killed her. The words hung in the dusty air like smoke. Killed her? I said. Cyrus was just a boy 30 years ago. He was 16, same age as my niece. Samuel unfolded the papers with trembling hands. They said she fell, tragic accident. The Heath family paid for a nice funeral, gave my brother money for his grief. Everyone believed it was an accident. But it wasn't. No. Samuel held up a document covered in faded ink. This is a confession. Written by Doc Henderson. He was the physician back then, examined her body. He couldn't live with the lie, so he wrote the truth and gave it to my brother before he died. My brother kept it hidden all these years, too afraid of the Heaths to use it, but he gave it to me before he passed, made me promise to wait for the right time. Marshal Wickham took the paper, his hands careful with the fragile document. As he read, his face went pale. Sweet Jesus, this says she was murdered. Blunt force trauma to the skull. The doctor was paid to write accidental death, but he documented what he really saw. Cyrus Heath beat my niece to death with a rock, Samuel said, his voice heavy with old grief. Because she'd rejected his advances. Because she dared to say no to a rich white boy who thought the world owed him whatever he wanted. And they covered it up, my father said. The Heaths have always protected their own, no matter what it cost others. Samuel's eyes found mine. This is proof Cyrus has killed before, that he's capable of murder. That he's exactly the kind of man who would kill Tom Wickham to protect his secrets. Hope, fragile but real, flickered in my chest. This changes everything. Does it, though? Vernon asked quietly. It's 30 years old. Cyrus was a boy. His lawyers will say it's irrelevant or forged or it establishes a pattern, Wickham interrupted. Shows he's killed before when threatened with exposure. It won't convict him on its own, but combined with Ruth's testimony. He stopped. Except Ruth can't testify. The law doesn't accept sign language as legal testimony. The hope guttered like a candle in wind. Then we need someone who can testify, Samuel said. Someone who knows what really happened between Cyrus and Tom. Someone who was there. Ruth was there. She saw it. I don't mean the murder. I mean what led to it. Samuel's eyes were knowing. Why would Cyrus kill the marshal's boy? What was Tom about to expose? The affair with Martha Pritchard. Ruth had drawn it, the two figures together in the shed before Tom interrupted them. Martha Pritchard, I said. She was with Cyrus when Tom walked in on them. Then we need her to confess, Wickham said. She never will. Her husband would destroy her, divorce, public shame. She'd lose everything. Maybe. Samuel's smile was grim. Or maybe she's tired of being Cyrus Heath's dirty secret. Maybe she's as much a victim as Tom was. Won't know unless someone asks her. I'll go, Vernon said suddenly. We all turned to stare at him. He flushed. My wife knows Martha. They work on the church quilting together. If anyone can convince her to come forward, it's Sarah. Your wife could be putting herself at risk, I warned. I know. Vernon met my eyes. You pulled my boy out of the river when he was 6 years old. Dove in without thinking, nearly drowned yourself saving him. I owe you more than I can ever repay, Silas. Let me help. Before I could respond, the church doors burst open. Sheriff Coleman stood there with 6 deputies, all armed. His young face was set in grim lines. Silas Brody, you're under arrest for corruption of a minor and kidnapping. The girl's to be remanded to county custody immediately. Ruth, who'd been sitting quietly in a pew, shrank back against the wall. You can't do this, Wickham said, stepping forward. I'm the marshal. County Sheriff Trump's town marshal in criminal matters. Coleman pulled out a warrant. Judge Morrison signed it an hour ago. Testimony from 5 witnesses says Brody's been seen acting inappropriately with the girl. 5 liars, you mean, my father spat. Doesn't matter what I think. Matters what the law says. Coleman's eyes found mine, and I saw something there. Not cruelty, just a young man doing an ugly job. I'm sorry, Brody, but you need to come with me, now. Ruth ran to me, grabbed my arm, her eyes wild with terror. She was signing frantically, no, 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 her whole body screaming what her voice couldn't. It's all right, I told her, though it wasn't. The marshal will keep you safe. I'll be back soon. But we both knew that was probably a lie. As Coleman's deputies pulled me toward the door, Samuel stepped forward. Wait. Before you take him, you should know. Cyrus Heath is a murderer. Has been since he was 16. I have proof. He held up the confession. Coleman barely glanced at it. That's for a judge to decide. Right now, I got a warrant to execute. They put me in chains. Real iron chains. Like I was some kind of dangerous criminal. As they led me out of the church, I looked back and saw Ruth collapse into Marshal Wickham's arms, sobbing silently. My father stood there with Samuel, both of them looking older than their years. And through the church window, I saw Cyrus Heath watching from across the street. He was smiling. They threw me in a cell in the basement of the county building. Stone walls, iron bars, a single high window that let in a square of gray light. I'd be here until the hearing tomorrow morning, they said. Then a trial. Then probably a rope. I sat on the stone floor, head in my hands, and felt the weight of failure crushing down. I'd tried to save Ruth, and instead, I'd made everything worse. Now she'd hang for murder, and I'd hang for crimes I'd never committed, and Cyrus Heath would walk away clean. Hours passed. Maybe more. Hard to tell in that windowless hole. Then footsteps on the stairs. Slow, shuffling footsteps. Vernon appeared at the bars, his face pale in the lamplight. Behind him was a woman in a dark cloak, her face hidden. Silas, Vernon said quietly. There's someone here who needs to talk to you. Someone who's ready to tell the truth. The woman lowered her hood. Martha Pritchard. Her face was bruised. fresh marks on her cheek and around her throat. Her husband's work, I realized with a cold clarity. I'm ready to confess, she said, her voice shaking but determined. I'll tell them everything about Cyrus, about Tom, about what really happened that day. For the first time in hours, I could breathe. Why? I asked. Why risk everything? She touched the bruises on her face. Because I'm tired of being afraid, tired of being owned, and because her voice broke. Because that girl deserves better than to hang for Cyrus Heath's sins. Hope. Real, solid hope. But even as relief flooded through me, I heard it. Horses outside. Many horses. Angry voices. Vernon's face went white. Dear God, they're coming here. Through the high window, I saw torchlight flickering. The mob had reformed, and this time they weren't coming for Ruth. They were coming for Martha. The mob's voices echoed down into the cell, angry, righteous, demanding. Deacon Pritchard's voice rose above them all, shrill with rage and wounded pride. My wife is in there, being held against her will by these criminals. I demand she be released immediately. Sheriff Coleman's voice, trying to maintain order. Sir, she came here of her own accord. She's been coerced, manipulated. These men have poisoned her mind against me. Martha's face had gone white as milk. Her hands trembled as she gripped the iron bars. He'll kill me, she whispered. If he gets me alone, he'll kill me for this. Vernon pulled her back from the bars, his face grim. We need to get you somewhere safe. The church, maybe, or— There is no safe, Martha said. Not from him, not from Cyrus. They own this town. The footsteps were coming down the stairs now. Heavy boots, multiple men. Pritchard's voice. I know she's down there. Martha, come out this instant. Martha shrank back against the wall, and I saw in her bruised face the same terror I'd seen in Ruth's. Two women, both trapped by powerful men who thought they owned them. Listen to me, I said urgently through the bars. You don't have to go back to him. There are laws. Laws? She laughed bitterly. The law says a wife belongs to her husband, that I'm his property, same as his horse or his house. I have no rights, Mr. Brody, none. Pritchard appeared at the bottom of the stairs, Sheriff Coleman behind him looking uncomfortable. Martha, come here, now. No. Her voice was small but steady. What did you say? I said no. Louder now. I won't go back. I won't be silent anymore. Pritchard's face went purple. You're my wife. You'll do as I say. Your wife. Martha's voice broke. Not your slave. Not your property. I'm a human being, and I won't protect Cyrus Heath's crimes anymore. You're hysterical. Clearly unwell. Pritchard turned to Coleman. Sheriff, my wife is obviously not in her right mind. I'm taking her home where she can be properly cared for. He reached for her arm. Martha pulled back. And that's when Vernon Kemp did something I'll never forget. He stepped between them, his face set. No, sir, you're not. Get out of my way, Kemp. Can't do that. I'll have you arrested for interference. Then arrest me. Vernon's voice was steady. But you're not touching her, not while she's saying no. For a moment, I thought Pritchard might swing at him. His fist clenched, his whole body coiled with rage. Then Samuel Twobears appeared on the stairs, moving slow but deliberate. There's another way, the old man said. An old way, older than your laws. What are you babbling about, Indian? Samuel's eyes were hard. Among my people, when a woman is in danger from her husband, she can claim sanctuary, ask for the protection of another family. It's an old law, older than this country, but it was written into the territorial treaties, still legally binding. That's absurd. It's legal. Marshal Wickham's voice came from the stairs above. He descended with a thick book under his arm. I looked it up after Sam mentioned it. Treaty of 1855, Article 12. A woman fleeing violence can claim sanctuary with another family for 30 days while the territorial court reviews her case. During that time, her husband cannot touch her, cannot force her to return. Cannot even speak to her without a mediator present. Pritchard's face had gone from purple to white. That law's ancient. No one's used it in decades. Doesn't make it invalid. Wickham opened the book, showed Coleman the page. It's still on the books, still enforceable. Mrs. Pritchard has the right to claim sanctuary. Martha was staring at Samuel like he'd offered her the keys to heaven. I can do that? Truly? If you wish it, Samuel said. My home is open to you. You'd be under the protection of the Kalapuya people. Your husband could not touch you there. She's not going anywhere. Pritchard lunged forward. Vernon and Wickham blocked him, Vernon's fists raised. Touch her and I'll lay you out flat, Deacon. Don't care if you own half the town. For a long moment, the standoff held. Pritchard breathing hard, Martha pressed against the wall, the rest of us ready to fight if we had to. Then Martha spoke, her voice clear and strong. I claim sanctuary. Under the Treaty of 1855, Article 12, I place myself under the protection of Samuel Two Bears and his family. The words hung in the air like a benediction. Pritchard's mouth worked, but no sound came out. His world, his control, his power, his respectability was crumbling around him. This isn't over, he finally said. I'll have lawyers. I'll fight this in every court in the territory. You'll regret this, Martha. All of you will regret this. He stormed up the stairs, his footsteps echoing like thunder. Coleman cleared his throat awkwardly. Well, I suppose that's legal. Ma'am, you're free to go with Mr. Two Bears if that's your choice. It is. Martha straightened, some of the fear leaving her face. And Sheriff, I have testimony to give about Cyrus Heath, about what he did to Tom Wickham. Ma'am, that can wait until— No, it can't. She looked at me through the bars. Mr. Brody's in here because of lies. Ruth's going to hang because of lies. I won't wait another minute to tell the truth. They brought us all upstairs to the sheriff's office. Martha sat at the desk, hands folded, and began to speak. Her voice was quiet at first, then grew stronger. I've been carrying on with Cyrus Heath for 6 months. I know it was wrong. I know it was adultery. But my husband— She touched the bruises on her face. My husband hasn't touched me with kindness in 10 years. Cyrus made me feel seen, feel wanted. Ma'am, I don't need your life story. You need to understand why Tom Wickham died. Martha's eyes were hard now. That day, Cyrus and I were meeting in the grain storage shed. We'd met there before. It was private, out of the way, but Tom Wickham was cutting through the alley. He saw us through a gap in the boards. Saw us together. She paused, gathering herself. Tom came to the door, said he was sorry, but he couldn't keep quiet about what he'd seen. Said it wasn't Christian. Said he'd have to tell the marshal. Tell his father. Cyrus begged him not to. Offered him money, but Tom wouldn't take it. Said some things were more important than money. So Cyrus killed him, Wickham said quietly. Yes. Martha's voice broke. He grabbed a piece of firewood leaning against the wall. Hit Tom from behind. Tom went down. Didn't move. Cyrus hit him again, and again, making sure. The room was silent except for Martha's ragged breathing. The deaf girl, Ruth. She was outside collecting eggs from the henhouse nearby. She saw through the gap in the boards. Cyrus saw her seeing. But he knew she couldn't tell anyone, couldn't testify. So he— Martha wiped her eyes. He told me to run, told me to go home, act normal, pretend nothing happened, said he'd take care of everything. He let Ruth take the blame, I said. Yes, because she was perfect, couldn't defend herself, couldn't tell her story. Everyone already thought she was simple-minded. Who would believe her over Cyrus Heath? Sheriff Coleman was writing everything down, his face pale. Ma'am, this is serious testimony. You understand you're implicating yourself in— I don't care anymore. Martha's voice was steel now. I won't let an innocent girl hang for something I witnessed. I won't protect Cyrus Heath anymore. I'm done being afraid. Marshal Wickham placed the old confession from Samuel on the desk beside Martha's testimony. And this proves Cyrus killed before. Same pattern. Someone threatened to expose his secrets, so he killed them. Coleman stared at the documents, then at Martha's bruised face, then at me in my chains. Jesus, this whole thing is a frame-up, Wickham finished. Cyrus killed Tom, framed Ruth, and then used his family's power to destroy anyone who tried to help her, including Silas Brody. Then we need to arrest Cyrus Heath, Coleman said slowly. Now, before he runs. Already gone, Vernon said from the doorway. His face was grim. I just heard from the livery. Cyrus rode out of town an hour ago, heading east. My heart sank. He'll disappear. Mexico, California, somewhere we'll never find him. Not if we move fast. Wickham was already grabbing his gun belt. Coleman, get a posse together. 5 good men, fast horses. Samuel, that old document, is it enough to get a territorial warrant? More than enough. Then let's... The door burst open. My father stood there, his face ashen, barely able to breathe. Oh, they've taken her. While we were all down here, they've taken Ruth. The world stopped. What? I was on my feet, chains rattling. Who took her? Old Man Heath and 3 of his men came to the church where I'd left her with Reverend Shaw, pushed the Reverend aside, grabbed her, rode off. They left a note. He held out a piece of paper with shaking hands. I read it through the bars, my blood turning to ice. Bring the confession and Martha Pritchard to the old mill by sunset. Come alone. If I see a posse, if I see the law, the girl dies. You want her back. You give me what I need to disappear clean. Oh, Heath. Old Man Heath had Ruth, and he'd kill her without a second thought if we didn't give him what he wanted. Let me out, I said to Coleman. My voice was steady now, empty of fear. Right now. I can't just... You got testimony from Martha Pritchard proving I'm innocent. You got proof Cyrus Heath is a murderer. You got an old man holding a 14-year-old girl hostage at an abandoned mill. I gripped the bars. Either let me out so I can get her back, or I swear to God I'll tear these bars down with my bare hands. Coleman looked at Wickham. The marshal nodded. He's right. We're wasting time. The key turned. The chains came off. I was free. What's Old Man Heath want? Vernon asked, studying the note again. Leverage, Samuel said. The confession proves his son's a killer. Martha's testimony does the same. He needs both destroyed so Cyrus can disappear clean. Start over somewhere new with a fresh name. We can't give him Martha, Wickham said. She's under sanctuary protection, and that confession is the only proof we have. Then we make copies, I interrupted. Samuel, can you rewrite the confession word for word? These hands? He held up his gnarled fingers. Not in an hour. I can, Martha said quietly. I have good handwriting, steady hands. If you give me the original, I can copy it while you ride to the mill. He'll know it's fake, Vernon said. Not if we give him the original, I looked at Wickham. And keep the copy for the court. Old Man Heath gets what he wants. He thinks he's won. Then we arrest him and Cyrus both with the copy as evidence. That's risky, Coleman said. If something goes wrong, Ruth dies if we do nothing. My voice was hard. I'm going to that mill, with or without your blessing. Wickham checked his gun. Then you're going with backup, quiet backup. He wants you alone, fine. But Vernon and I will circle around through the woods. You keep him talking, we get into position. I'm coming too, my father said. Dad, your eyes. Can still see shapes at 20 feet. That's all I need. He picked up his rifle. That's my granddaughter he's got. I ain't sitting this out. Martha was already copying the confession, her pen scratching across paper with practiced precision. Her hand didn't shake once. Whatever fear had controlled her before was gone now, burned away by something stronger, purpose. How long until sunset? I asked. Vernon checked his pocket watch. 2 hours, maybe less. Then we need to move. We were saddling horses when Deacon Pritchard appeared in the stable doorway. His face was haggard, his eyes red. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in the past hour. I heard what happened, he said quietly. The Heath boy taking the girl. Come to gloat? My voice was bitter. Your bank's about to take my house. Your friends are trying to hang me, and now I'm calling in the mortgage. I stopped, hand frozen on the saddle cinch. What? The mortgage. I'm calling it in, immediately. He pulled papers from his coat. Effective now, you no longer owe the bank anything. The debt is forgiven. I stared at him, not understanding. Why? Because my wife just told me what she's been doing, what she's been part of. And because, his voice cracked, because I drove her to it. 10 years of coldness, of treating her like property instead of a partner, of caring more about money and status than the woman I married. He looked at me with hollow eyes. I'm a fool, Brody, a blind, prideful fool, and I almost let my foolishness kill an innocent girl. Deacon, I can't undo what I've done to Martha, can't take back the bruises or the years of cruelty. But I can do this. He held out the papers. Your house is yours, free and clear. And the mill job, I'll talk to whoever buys out Old Man Heath. Make sure you're rehired. I took the papers, not quite believing what I was holding. Freedom, security, a home for Ruth to come back to, if we got her back. Thank you, I said quietly. Pritchard nodded, turned to leave, then stopped. Brody, when you bring that girl home, tell her I'm sorry. Tell her this town is sorry. Then he was gone, leaving me standing there with forgiveness I'd never expected. We rode out in the gray afternoon, storm clouds building overhead. Martha had finished the copy, perfect duplicate of the original confession. We wrapped the real document in oilcloth and tucked it in my coat. The old mill stood 3 miles upriver, a blackened skeleton against the darkening sky. It had burned 5 years back, killed 3 men, and nobody had rebuilt it. Now it waited like a rotting tooth, perfect for the kind of dark business Old Man Heath had in mind. We left the horses a quarter-mile back and approached on foot. Wickham and Vernon circled wide using the tree cover. My father stayed with me, his rifle ready despite his failing eyes. You remember when Emma was born? He said quietly as we walked. Every minute of it. You cried. Big tough logger, crying like a baby because you were so happy. He gripped my arm. You're getting a second chance, son. Don't waste it. I won't. We pushed through the broken mill door. Inside, the air smelled of char and rot. Rain had pooled in the collapsed sections, black water reflecting the gray sky. Old Man Heath stood on the second-floor catwalk, Ruth beside him. His arm was around her throat, a pistol pressed to her temple. She was alive, conscious, but terrified, her eyes huge and pleading. Brody, Heath called down. You alone? Just me and my father. Old man with bad eyes don't count for much. Smart. Heath's voice was cold, controlled. You have what I asked for? I held up the oilcloth package. The confession, original document, just like you wanted. And Martha Pritchard? Can't bring her. She claims sanctuary, treaty law. Your son's lawyers can explain it to you. Heath's jaw tightened, but he nodded. Doesn't matter. The confession's what matters. That's the only hard evidence. Martha's word against Cyrus's. My lawyers can handle that. Let Ruth go first. You think I'm stupid? Throw up the document. I check it, then you get the girl. I hesitated. If he got that confession, if he destroyed it before we could stop him. But Ruth's eyes were on mine, trusting, believing I'd save her. I threw the package up. It landed on the catwalk at Heath's feet. He bent down, keeping the gun on Ruth, and opened it, unfolded the yellowed paper, read the first few lines, and smiled. 30 years of waiting for this, he said. 30 years of my son's crime hanging over us. But now, he pulled a match from his pocket. Wait, I shouted. You got what you wanted. Let her go. In a moment, the match scraped against stone, flared to life. First, I make sure this is real. He held the flame to the corner of the document. The old paper caught immediately, flames racing across the confession that had taken 30 years to surface. The evidence of Cyrus's first murder turning to ash and smoke. Heath watched it burn with satisfaction, then dropped the flaming remnants into the black water below. They hissed and died. There, he said. Now there's no proof my son ever... Actually, Marshal Wickham's voice rang out from the darkness. There's plenty of proof. He stepped into view, rifle aimed at Heath. Vernon appeared on the other side, flanking him. Heath's eyes went wide. You were supposed to come alone. I lied. I pulled the copy of the confession from my other pocket. And you just burned a fake. The real document, well, a perfect copy, is right here, along with Martha Pritchard's signed testimony about Tom Wickham's murder. You and your son are finished, Heath. For a moment, Heath just stood there processing, understanding that he'd been outmaneuvered. Then his face twisted with rage. If I'm finished, then she comes with me. He swung the gun from Ruth's head toward me. Ruth moved. She was deaf, but she'd learned to read vibrations through her feet. She must have felt Wickham and Vernon approaching through the old catwalk boards before Heath did. She slammed her head backward into Heath's nose. He screamed. The gun fired wild. Ruth dropped, rolling away. Heath staggered, blood streaming from his broken nose, the gun swinging around to find her. My shot took him in the shoulder. He spun, crashed against the railing. The old wood, weakened by fire and rot, gave way. Old Man Heath fell 15 feet into the black water below, came up sputtering, his wounded arm hanging useless. Vernon and Wickham had him surrounded, rifles pointed down. "Don't move, Heath," Wickham said. "It's over." I climbed up to the catwalk. Ruth sat there shaking, her dress torn, her face streaked with tears and dirt. When she saw me, she threw herself into my arms. I held her tight, felt her sobbing silently against my chest. "You're safe," I whispered. "You're safe now." "I've got you." She pulled back, looked up at me, and signed something. 3 movements, clear and deliberate. I didn't know sign language, but somehow I understood. Father, daughter, family. "Yeah," I said, my voice breaking. "That's right. That's exactly right." Below us, Sheriff Coleman arrived with deputies. They pulled Old Man Heath from the water, put him in chains. "Where's Cyrus?" Coleman demanded. Heath, broken and bleeding, just shook his head. "Gone, halfway to California by now." "We'll find him," Wickham said grimly. "We've got his description, his crimes documented. He'll hang eventually." But I saw something flicker in Heath's eyes, something that made my blood run cold. He wasn't as defeated as he appeared. And I realized we'd stopped one Heath, but the other was still out there, still dangerous, still hunting. 3 days later, they held the hearing in the packed town hall. Every seat filled, folks standing along the walls, others pressed against the windows outside. The whole county had come to see justice done, or watch it fail. Judge Morrison presided, the same circuit judge who'd nearly railroaded me days before. But now he had Martha Pritchard's testimony, Samuel Tubear's confession, and Sheriff Coleman's account of Old Man Heath's attempted murder at the mill. Ruth sat beside me at the defendant's table, her hand gripping mine so tight my fingers went numb. She wore a new dress, simple blue calico, that Vernon's wife had sewn for her. Her hair was braided neat. She looked small and terrified, but she held her head high. The courtroom was silent as Morrison read through the evidence. Minutes stretched like hours. Ruth's hand trembled in mine. Finally, Morrison looked up. "In the matter of the death of Thomas Wickham, this court finds that Ruth Brody," he emphasized the last name, "is innocent of all charges." The evidence clearly shows Cyrus Heath as the murderer. A territorial warrant has been issued for his arrest. The relief was physical. Ruth sagged against me, crying silently. "Furthermore," Morrison continued, "all charges against Silas Brody are dismissed. The adoption stands as legal and binding. Mr. Brody's reputation is to be fully restored." The courtroom erupted in applause. Not everyone. Some folks still looked skeptical, but enough to matter. Marshal Wickham approached the bench. "Your Honor, there's still the matter of Cyrus Heath's whereabouts. Old Man Heath refuses to say where his son went. Then Old Man Heath can rot in jail until he remembers." Morrison's gavel came down. 10 years for kidnapping, attempted murder, and obstruction of justice. Cyrus Heath is to be considered armed and extremely dangerous. A reward of $500 for information leading to his capture. $500, a fortune. Every bounty hunter and lawman in 3 territories would be looking for Cyrus now. But I felt uneasy. Something about Old Man Heath's silence. The way he'd smiled when they led him away in chains, like he knew something we didn't. We walked out into afternoon sunshine, Ruth clinging to my arm. People actually stepped aside, some nodding respectfully. A few even spoke. "Good to see justice done, Brody." That girl's lucky to have you. We're sorry. Sorry we doubted. Not everyone. Plenty of folks still looked away, embarrassed or stubborn. But it was a start. Vernon met us on the courthouse steps. Silas, there's something you need to know. Something I just heard from the telegraph office. My gut clenched. What? Cyrus Heath was spotted 2 days ago, not heading to California. Vernon's face was grim. Heading north, toward the Canadian border. So he's running. Good. Let him run. That's not all. Vernon pulled me aside, away from Ruth's eyes. The telegrapher said Cyrus sent a message before he left, to someone in Portland. The message said, "Unfinished business. Will handle permanently before crossing border." Cold dread settled in my stomach. What's in Portland? Nothing that I... Vernon stopped. His face went white. Oh, God. The deaf school. There's a school for deaf children in Portland. It's the only one in the territory. The pieces fell into place with sickening clarity. Cyrus knew Ruth could identify him, knew she'd been the witness to Tom's murder. And Cyrus was the kind of man who couldn't leave loose ends. He wasn't running to Canada. He was coming back to finish what he'd started, to kill Ruth. We need to move. Now. I grabbed Ruth's hand. Vernon, get horses. Wickham, we need every man you can spare. If Cyrus is heading to Portland looking for deaf children, he'll hear about Ruth being in the clear, Wickham finished. No, she's still alive. Still a witness. And he'll come here, my father said. To our home. It's isolated. Perfect for an ambush. Ruth was watching us, reading our faces even if she couldn't hear the words. Her eyes asked the question, what's wrong? I didn't know how to tell her, didn't know the signs, so I just held her close and felt her heart beating against my chest like a trapped bird. That's when the shot rang out. The courthouse window exploded. Glass showered down. People screamed, diving for cover. I threw Ruth to the ground, covering her body with mine. Another shot. The wooden pillar beside us splintered. Roof across the street, Wickham shouted. Sniper! Through the chaos, I saw him. Cyrus Heath crouched on the mercantile roof, rifle aimed at where Ruth had been standing. His face was twisted with determination. He'd never left at all. Never run to California or Canada. He'd been here the whole time, waiting, watching. Planning to kill Ruth in broad daylight and disappear in the chaos? Deputies were returning fire. Cyrus ducked, fired back. This wasn't the coward who'd murdered Tom from behind. This was a desperate man with nothing to lose. Get her inside, Wickham yelled. I started to drag Ruth toward the courthouse door. She was signing frantically. What's happening? What's happening? Her face white with terror. Another shot. This one so close, I felt the wind of it pass my ear. Cyrus was aiming at Ruth, only at Ruth, and he was a good shot. Please, I prayed to God, to Sarah, to anyone listening. Don't take her. Not now. Not after everything. Ruth's hand found mine, squeezed 3 times. Our signal. Our promise. I'm here. You're here. We're family. Then she did something that stopped my heart. She stood up, just stood there in the middle of the street, facing Cyrus Heath on that roof, making herself a target. Ruth, no! I tried to pull her down, but she shook me off. Stepped forward, raised her hands, and began to sign, slow, deliberate movements, her hands telling a story her voice couldn't. I didn't understand the words. But Cyrus did. He'd frozen, rifle still aimed, watching her hands move. She was telling him what she'd seen. The murder, the affair, everything. Signing it out for the whole town to witness, even though most of them couldn't understand. But someone could. She's testifying, a woman's voice said. Mrs. Chen, the seamstress, who'd learned sign language when her grandson went deaf. She's telling what happened, how Cyrus killed Tom Wickham, how he tried to frame her. Everything. People were gathering now, despite the danger, watching Ruth's hands move, watching her face. And suddenly it didn't matter that sign language wasn't legal testimony. Didn't matter that courts wouldn't accept it, because truth doesn't need a voice. It just needs a witness. Ruth's hands moved faster now, more urgent. She pointed at Cyrus, made the motion for murder, for lies, for cruelty. And then she made one final sign, both hands from her chest, extending outward. Mrs. Chen's voice was soft. She forgives him. The words hung in the air like smoke. Cyrus's rifle wavered, his face crumpled. And for just a moment, I saw not a murderer, but a broken man who'd spent 30 years running from what he'd done. "I'm sorry," he said. His voice carried across the silent street. "Tom, I'm sorry. Morning Dove, I'm sorry." Then he lowered the rifle, set it down on the roof, raised his hands. "I surrender," he said. "No more running, no more." They took Cyrus Heath without a fight. He walked down from that roof like a man going to his own funeral. Didn't resist when they put him in chains. As they led him past us, he looked at Ruth. "How?" he asked. "How can you forgive me?" Ruth's hands moved. Mrs. Chen translated, "Because hate is a prison too. And I choose freedom." Cyrus wept then, broken, defeated, but somehow less monstrous than before. As if Ruth's forgiveness had let him finally see himself clearly. They hanged him 6 weeks later. He went quiet, didn't fight it. Samuel Two Bears stood witness, finally seeing justice for his niece after 30 years. And Ruth, she came home with me to the cabin that was now legally ours, to the family we'd chosen, to the life we'd fought for. That evening, as the sun set through the pines, she sat at the kitchen table drawing. Not scenes of murder or terror this time, just simple things: a house, trees, two figures, one large, one small, holding hands. She signed something to me. I still didn't know much sign language, but I was learning. "Home," she signed. "Safe. Family." "Yeah," I said, my voice thick. "That's right, daughter. That's exactly right." Outside, the first stars were appearing. Inside, the lamp burned warm and steady. And for the first time in 5 years, my house wasn't empty. It was full. That all happened near 40 years ago now. Seems like yesterday sometimes, other times like a different life entirely. Ruth grew up strong and stubborn, same as any daughter worth her salt, learned to read and write better than most hearing folks, taught sign language to half the county. Turned out there were more deaf children around than anyone realized, just hiding because they were ashamed. She gave them a voice, even without sound. She married a good man eventually, carpenter named Jacob, who learned to sign before he even proposed. They had 4 children, all of them hearing, all of them fluent in 2 languages. She's a grandmother now, lives just down the road, still can't hear thunder, but she's got ears for kindness, just like I told that crowd all those years ago. Cyrus Heath hanged that winter. He went quiet in the end. Maybe Ruth's forgiveness broke something in him that needed breaking. And maybe he finally understood what he'd become. Either way, justice was served, even if it came late. Me? I'm 82 now. My back aches, these hands shake, and I can't swing an axe worth a damn anymore. But I got no complaints. I raised a good daughter, watched her build a good life. That's more than most men get to say. I think about that week often, how close we came to hanging an innocent girl, how easy it was for good people to turn cruel when they were scared, how one man standing firm can change everything, or how one man staying silent can let evil win. But mostly I think about Ruth's hands making that sign for forgiveness, how she looked at the man who'd tried to destroy her and chose mercy instead of hate. That's real strength, friends. Not the kind that builds cabins or fells trees. The kind that says, "I forgive you," when nobody would blame you for holding on to rage. Dignity ain't in your bloodline or your bank account. It's in how you treat folks when the whole world's watching, and especially when nobody is. It's in standing up when others sit down. It's in opening your door to someone who's got nowhere else to go. It's in choosing mercy when revenge would be easier. Ruth taught me that. A deaf girl who couldn't speak taught an old logger more about being human than 40 years of living ever did. If this story touched something in you, if you've ever stood alone against the crowd, or wished you had, or needed someone to stand for you, I'd be grateful to know where you're listening from. Are you in timber country like I was, down in the flatlands, somewhere far from these mountains? Doesn't matter much. Good people are everywhere, waiting for their chance to do right. Until next time, friend, may your dignity carry you through whatever storms come. May you have the courage to protect those who can't protect themselves. And may you remember that family isn't just blood. It's who you choose to stand beside when the torches come. That's the truth as I know it. And I've lived long enough to know it's the only truth that matters. The fire's burning low now. Time for old men to rest and let the young folks carry on. But before I go, remember this. Every person you meet is fighting a battle you can't see. Be kind. Be just. Be the one who stands when it counts. And maybe, just maybe, when it's your turn to face the hard choice, you'll think of Ruth's hands signing forgiveness in the middle of that street, and you'll know what to do. God bless you. And good night. Soft fade, as if the narrator is setting down his coffee, staring into the embers, the story told, the lesson given, the night settling in quiet and complete.